Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Theory of Life podcast. We have Dr. Michael Huemer on once more. Thank you so much for coming on. We also have John Bryden, who's been on many, many times. This is going to be an excellent conversation. If the two of you could possibly introduce yourselves, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Uh, I'm Michael Huemer. I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of Colorado. I've written about a dozen books and about 90 articles, including about, epistemology, ethics, a small amount of metaphysics, political philosophy, um, and, a lot of different topics.
Cool. Thank you. All right, John. What's going
All
on with
right.
you, Mr. New
I'm,
student?
let's see. Well, I am Wade's friend, John. I am not a professor at the University of Colorado, but I completed my master's of philosophy and recently just applied to a bunch of PhD programs. So fingers crossed. And yeah, I work at a law firm and write things for attorneys that they don't want to write themselves. And then by night, I read philosophy. So, and I'm also Wade's friend. So throw that into the mix.
Which PhD programs are you actually applying to?
Well,
I
I
don't think you.
applied to Purdue, St. Louis University, University of Kentucky, Boston College, Fordham University, and two more, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. But
Hmm. You could also apply to University of Colorado Boulder. I suppose that might be a. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank y'all very much. Yeah. So I suppose we'll just talk about free will. I mean, I suppose I'll hand it over to Dr. Huemer. Could you possibly lay out the different perspectives with respect to free will? Because there's libertarianism, there's compatibilism, there's various views. If you could lay that out, that would be great, and then we could discuss some ideas. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so traditionally people debate about whether we have free will, and then also kind of debate about what it was. So maybe I start with what free will is. So there's a basic conception that there are a couple of things you need to have free will. You need to have alternative possibilities, and you need to have self-control. So by alternative possibilities, I mean there have to be multiple different things that you could do. Okay, and then self-control, meaning which of those things is realized is up to you, under your control, etc. Okay, and you need both of these. So, you can imagine a robot that controls its actions in some sense, right? But you would think that it doesn't have free will because it's deterministic, like assuming that it is, right? So there's an algorithm that determines what it does at any given time. Or you could also have alternative possibilities without self-control. So suppose there's like a random mechanism inside your brain that, it's like quantum mechanically random. And it just, periodically it goes one way and then that makes you do something. That's not free will either. So that gives you alternative possibilities, but not self-control. Okay. So you need both alternative possibilities and self-control. And then the views that people have traditionally are libertarianism, hard determinism, and soft determinism. So the libertarians think we have free will and determinism is false because it's incompatible with free will. The hard determinists think, oh, okay, no, everything is predetermined, and that's incompatible with free will, so we don't have free will. And then the so-called soft determinists or compatibilists think that, no, actually you could have free will and determinism. Right? And by the way, it's common for students to misunderstand this, and they try to make the doctrine be something that's closer to what they would believe. Okay, when I say you have free will and determinism, I don't mean sometimes you have free will and sometimes you have determinism. No, I mean the view is everything is completely 100% predetermined, and also you're still free. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, which is the most counterintuitive position, but bizarrely has been the dominant position in the history of the subject, right? Like
Yeah.
among professional philosophers.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think one important thing to note is that libertarians and hard determinists would have something in common. We're both incompatibilists, right? We both think we're going to reject that intuition that somehow you could be free and determined at the same time.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, so our buddy John over here, he is thoroughly persuaded by your arguments. And I really love your arguments. I think they're great. I'm just not smart enough. I'm probably missing something. And he has a master's degree, and you're a professor, so y'all need to educate me. What am I missing? I feel like some sort of determinism is true, and this precludes free will. So convert me.
You need to give your objections to Dr. Huemer towards
Yep. Well, like,
libertarianism.
yeah, like
Yep.
what's the evidence for determinism?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I have a line of thinking here that I have written down, and yeah, so maybe I can just say it. So I have this written down. Desires always push us to action unless one, it's impossible for us to do it, or incompatible with a stronger desire, right? And that seems to account for all of our actions, right? Now, I could be totally wrong about this. I mean, perhaps there are situations where it seems as though weaker desire rules out, but I don't think that's true. And it'd be kind of weird if it was true. And so that's my general perspective.
Oh, okay. Good. So, yeah, maybe everything you do is determined because you always have to do the thing that you most want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's independent of like modern physics, because like I was tempted to start bringing up that modern physics, the
Yeah.
leading interpretations are indeterministic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's more philosophical instead of scientific, I suppose.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what I think is that there's not really a well-defined thing that you most want to do in many cases.
Yeah.
So frequently you have conflicting motives of different kinds. So you could have like what philosophers like to call inclinations versus judgments.
Hmm.
So like you have the student who they have a big test tomorrow and they think that they should study for the test, but they also want to stay up partying and drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
assume that this happens a lot.
Real.
Okay, so then there's different kinds of motivations. There's this sort of inclination to party, which is this short term whatever.
Yeah. For sure.
And then there's your judgment about what would be the best thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because there are qualitatively different kinds of motivations, there isn't really a scale on which you compare both of them and say that one of them is stronger than the other.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I'll give John the floor a little bit before I just ramble on again.
I mean, I don't really have anything to add to that, but just in our conversations, I know for you, it seems as though in our conversations you deny the idea. Dr. Huemer talked about self control being part of free will or the ability to have control over your action. In
Yeah.
our conversations, it seems as though that would be the hurdle for you is the belief that a person could have self control, like the student who wants to party, for instance, and study. Like maybe their stronger desire is to party. But I think in our conversations, you would deny that, like, if they chose to study, you would say, oh, that's just the stronger desire. That wasn't
Hmm.
them having self control over the stronger desire and then choosing to, be responsible and study.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would
Yeah.
reject the idea, I think, just in our conversations that you can have self control over a strong competing desire or something along those lines.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very interesting. I mean, I think the general way I would go. I mean, I hesitate bringing up physics because I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. I'm so dumb with science. But I mean, so there is some precedent for some indeterministic stuff, right, in the quantum realm, right? So that being said, maybe it's not terribly surprising that sometimes weaker desires win out because this would be kind of equivalent to something that's less probable happening, in a sense. Would you grant that analogy? Kind of.
Uh, Maybe. I mean, it's sort of like you're equating probability with strength, but I'm not sure that would
Yeah.
be right.
Maybe not. I
'Cause-
don't know.
yeah, right? Because like, isn't it supposed to be that if desire A is stronger than desire B, then A just wins out 100%? Like, why would it only have a probability? Just
Well, so what I'm saying is like, if on y'all's worldview, it's completely possible and it happens frequently, for weaker desires to win out. It seems like the weaker force, the less probable action happens. That seems intuitive to me, but I could be wrong about that. But in addition to that, that seems a little bit strange, right? And so like it's like there's precedent for it happening at the quantum realm, but maybe not in our minds. I don't. It just seems a little bit simpler to suppose that maybe our stronger desires win out each time. Like I'm not sure. That just seems more
yeah,
likely.
yeah,
Um,
and that would be that would be a simpler theory, but it's oversimplified, right?
okay.
Human beings are complex, and we don't just have like a scale of strength, and then there's just and every motivation is on that scale, and then everything is just above, below, or at the same place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Wait, wait, I've got a question for you. Like
Mm.
when that like in the analogy that Dr. Huemer used about like the student trying to weigh whether they should study or whether they should party, what do you
Yeah.
think what do you think's going on in that deliberation process when the student is weighing their options and, you know, also considering the voice of their conscience because moral realism is true, right? They're
Mhm.
weighing their options going, I really think I should study so I can, get that really good grade. But, partying really sounds like fun. When they're weighing their options, like that process of deliberation where
Mhm.
the outcome, at least in the mind of the student, isn't determined. Like they don't know in that moment, yeah, I'm going to go party or I'm going to go
Yeah.
study. Like when it feels indeterminate to the student because they're deliberating and weighing their options, like what do
Mhm.
you think that that's evidence at all for libertarianism? Like that process of deliberation when it really seems to the student that they could go either way, that there isn't
Yeah.
like a determined outcome. I'm just
That
curious.
that 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 that, that is very interesting. I mean, I've heard in compatible circles that we can. There's a sense in which we could have done otherwise, and it's kind of like epistemic possibility, right? And like, and that's sufficient to ground our intuition that we could have done otherwise, or something. And so like maybe, but that isn't. I don't know if that's strong evidence that we can
Well, I'm,
actually.
I'm just saying this, the process of deliberation itself, when it appears to the
Okay.
student
Yeah.
that there are two different outcomes that their evening could have. Outcome
Mhm.
one, they study hard for Dr. Huemer's philosophy test, and then outcome
Mhm.
two, they go and party all night. And
Yeah.
in
So.
I'm just
Yeah.
asking, like, if you think that that process of deliberation could potentially be evidence for libertarianism or that experience.
I mean, maybe. I suppose like there would be some kind of determinist explanation for the deliberation itself. But I mean, with respect to the details of the deliberation, I'm not quite sure. I do want to like note that what Dr. Humer said about the different kinds of desires and motivations is really important. I think that really matters. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's fine to take all kinds of motivation and just blanket it with the word desire. And I think my argument kind of works. Maybe I'm not sure about that, but that seems right. So
well,
I'm not sure about the details of the motivation, but either way, it just is the case that the strongest desires, whatever that means, wins out.
yeah. I mean, you might think that if that was true, then you don't have to deliberate. What is the student struggling about? They're just automatically going to do whatever they must.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but we do deliberate. Maybe that is the process by which we do things.
And
Maybe that's evidence for God. I don't know.
the other thing to think, so you can't really exactly prove anything here, but
Yeah, yeah.
um, you could tell a story about somebody going through this deliberation, and you could sort of tell two versions of the story, and they could sound exactly the same right up until it says, and then she decided to.
Hmm.
And then in one version it could be go out partying, and the other version it could be study for the test.
Okay.
And nothing would be weird about either of them, right?
Hmm.
Um, and like the person themselves could be introspecting, and this could happen on two occasions, and introspectively they could not tell the difference, except that one time they decided to do one thing, one time the other. So then it's
Yeah.
like, so then what's the evidence for determinism? Like, you know,
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, it makes me think. So here's another way to frame the objection to a libertarian view, right? So I mean, let's take an instance where someone acts on a weaker desire, even though stronger ones are present. So here's the question. Maybe we don't want to frame it in terms of probability, but there's a live question on the table. Why did they do that? I choose stronger desire. And I throw my like there's probably no explanation for why they did that. Rather, there is an explanation for why they did it, right? But there's no explanation for why they did it rather than the stronger one. And there's like some quantum precedent for this kind of thing happening, I suppose. But like that seems far removed from psychology, so I'm not sure.
yeah. I mean, the reason why it doesn't seem it doesn't seem like you can compare the different motives is, well, one reason is that one of them is a judgment and the other one is a desire. And
Yeah.
okay, and then so is there, there's strength of desire. I understand that, but is there strength of judgment? I mean, there's a couple of things. There's like how good you think it would be,
Yeah.
and then there's like how confident you are in your judgment. That is
Hmm.
good, but neither of those is exactly commensurable with the strength of a desire, right? Um,
Yeah. Would you say that that values and what was the word you used? Um,
I don't know. Judgment.
Judgment. Yeah.
It was like you
Would
said, made a distinction between judgment and desire, I
yeah,
think.
yeah. So would you say that judgments are internally motivating?
Um,
Perhaps
Sometimes.
sometimes. Okay,
Well,
interesting. I wonder. I mean, because it seems to me like a judgment's going to be it's going to be effective insofar as you want to act on the judgment, right? And that kind of desire is the same kind of desire as me wanting to eat ice cream. If values and judgments are internally motivating, then it could be different, and there could be some relevant difference. I'm not sure.
yeah. I mean, I don't think you need a separate desire, and I guess I don't sense any evidence of this separate desire. So, like, it seems to me like I sometimes do things because I judge that that's the correct thing to do. I'm not aware of a desire to do the thing that's in addition to that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. For sure. Yeah.
or there's sort of like there's a kind of felt desire, right? There's a sort of experience of feeling desire for something, and
Yeah.
that's not what happens when you're thinking about studying for the test. Not
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
feeling that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I suppose if you just decided to study for the test, like, there's is there like literally zero? Well, you wouldn't say there's zero desire there, but like, would you say there's zero
No,
desire
I
there?
mean, yeah, like I'm not totally clear how people are using the word desire, right? So
Mm.
I want to say, okay, well, there's a thing that people call inclination, let's say,
Yeah. Yeah.
desire that you can actually kind of feel, you can experience this desire.
Hmm.
And then I think there's a broad use of desire where it's just anytime you're motivated to do something, a philosopher will just attribute to you a desire. Yeah.
I mean, that seems kind of right. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm curious for you. Like, let's say that the student in this thought experiment chooses to go party. They're like, I'll wing it. I've winged tests in the past. Maybe I'll somehow get an A. And then they fail the test the next day, and it messes up their GPA.
Oh
But
no.
they feel a sense of guilt because in their mind, and they could be irrational for thinking this. They go,
Mm.
I could have studied last night. I really could have studied last night. I thought about studying last night. I even had, my
Yeah.
notes and the PowerPoint slides like ready at any given moment to pull up, but I didn't. I chose to party
Yeah.
instead. I'm just curious from your perspective, like that thought that the student had that, I could have done otherwise than I did. I could have gone and studied and I didn't do that. How do you think about that experience that they had of guilt, of remorse, or at least the thought that they could have done otherwise in the moment? I'm not saying they could have done
Yeah.
otherwise, but at
For
least
sure.
that
For
experience that the student had of, man, I really should have studied and could have studied. Um, what do you think's going on there?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably some evidence that you could have done otherwise. I mean, I can grant that. I don't know. It just feels like my argument's stronger than that. I don't really know. I mean, like maybe we should take
Yeah.
that into account. But like maybe that's just evidence for epistemic possibility. I mean, maybe. And also, I mean, I wonder how many people actually don't have the intuition that the ability to do otherwise is necessary for freedom. Probably not many. Probably most people have that intuition,
Well,
but it just is
I'm not
that
even
a lot.
saying at the moment that you need the ability to do otherwise to be responsible. I think that is the case, but I'm just
Mm,
like the phenomena itself of that student having the experience where they're like, "Man, I really could have done other than what I did
yeah.
last night." Why? And
Well,
like, and they're beating themselves up over it. Like, I'm curious, like that phenomena itself of like at least having the experience where it feels like you could have done otherwise. Like, do you think? Like, how do you understand that? I guess.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess what I said a minute ago, it might be evidence for like it. If the world had been different, then I would have done otherwise, or something like that. It seems as though I could have done otherwise, even though like it's kind of like a, as far as I know, I could have done otherwise. But once I start looking at my desires, my brain states, and everything, I realized that I couldn't have. But maybe what you're saying is evidence for that I could have done otherwise.
And
And
that's
so
why Dr. Huemer is going to give them an A on the test instead. Because they couldn't have done otherwise than party, so he's got
Yeah.
he's got to
well,
he's got to give them that A, right?
so here, okay. This is kind of an interesting segue, right? So I feel like, okay, if we have an intuition that someone's morally responsible, so okay, I'm gonna shake off my anti-realism for a second and just like embrace the moral realism kind of thing, right? So if we have an intuition that what someone did was wrong, it seems as though we might have the intuition that they could have refrained from doing it, which might be evidence that they actually could have refrained from doing it. Is that a valid inference or not?
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's just like a whole bunch of just, totally common sense things that presuppose free will, including this situation where you regret what you've done. Right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that presupposes free will. And there's just like, criticizing or evaluating people's actions. So, like, on your view, is anybody ever irrational? Right? There's never anything bad to say about what anybody did. You can't even say it was irrational because, like, they just acted on the strongest desire, which is necessary. It's unavoidable
Hmm.
to do that. So, like, you can't say that's irrational.
Well, I don't know. I suppose at this point I want to put myself in a compatibilist, headspace, right?
Yeah.
And figure out what they say to that, because they probably have something to say about the ability to be irrational, even though like you're determined to do so.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is part of why there are compatibilists. Right? Um,
yeah.
uh,
Um,
yeah, I mean, because this is like this is a big thing among, I don't know, a certain brand of philosophers that you try to preserve the appearances or try to not say anything that sounds too crazy. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
You don't want to, you're like, oh, wow, it seems like everything is determined, but you don't want to be like, okay, nobody ever made a mistake. Like, that's
yeah,
crazy. um, or,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you should never blame anyone. Nobody's blameworthy for anything. Like, okay, so then you just try to figure out how you could still say people
Well,
did it wrong.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I suppose, like, I mean, if your evidence for determinism is that wrong, and you still have the strong intuition that someone's blameworthy, then you can, be a compatibilist and like do some weird philosophical
No,
jumping jack.
I think there was
Oh
like
no.
a book. I think it was called Just Desserts. It was a debate book with Daniel Dennett. I can't remember who he was debating, but Dennett was a compatibilist, and the person he was debating the book was a hard determinist. And I think the hard determinist was arguing that, since free will or libertarian free will doesn't exist, we need to just retrain our like emotive responses to when people do things that upset us, or like
Mm,
we need
okay.
to retrain our emotive responses. And also, he argued that instead of having any any kind of retributive justice or whatever, we need to have like a what was it? I think a not a what was it? He said we need to have like a quarantine model for justice, like not because in his mind we can't hold people accountable for what
Yeah.
they do, so we just
Yeah.
need to put people in jail as like a quarantine, and
Yeah.
also adjust our reactive attitudes towards what people are doing. And I'm not going to say that guy's like irrational or crazy, but it was interesting because in an interview I heard him he talked about how he struggles with his reactive attitudes when his kids misbehave because he
Yeah.
says he
Yeah.
has to remind himself that they couldn't do otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Oh, good. So I just found this book. It's Daniel Dennett and Greg Caruso.
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I suppose if I was more inclined to be a moral realist, then I might be more inclined to accept some kind of libertarianism. It's kind of interesting. I wonder how many people are like moral non-realist, but they accept libertarian free will.
I have
I
no.
wonder how many people are like that. Are there? Probably somewhere. um,
I
I
assume,
get.
yeah.
I think Dr. Humer asked you a question about like reactive attitudes, like 3 or 4 minutes ago. Like, are we rational in our reactive attitudes to when like people do stuff that we find to be like bad or offensive? Like, do you think that do you think that reactive attitudes towards stuff we deem to be bad do you think those are a rational way, or should like we retrain our reactive attitudes? Like, Like
Hmm.
let's say, for instance, not to take a dark turn, but the shooting that happened at Brown University last weekend. I'm sure that there were a variety of reactive attitudes when people heard
Hmm.
the news, and when people found out that the shooter, was found and all that stuff. I'm sure there were a
Yeah.
variety of reactive attitudes. The attitudes of like anger and disgust and like sorrow,
Blame.
like and blame as well. Blame.
Yeah.
Do you think that those are irrational? Or like, what do you? Not to put you on the spot, but just like to.
I, I'm not quite. I mean, no. I mean, like my intuition is telling me no. So I'm not going to sit here and like try to do a bunch of jumping jacks trying to get out of that. I'm not sure exactly why, or that they're well. So wait, they are rap. I'm gonna say yes, they are rap. I'm not exactly sure what justification I have for thinking that. I did do like a blog post recently. I mean, this is not an answer to the question. Okay, this is not an answer to the question. But I think this is like just the best move that people like me can give. So like at the end of the day, stuff like the ability to do otherwise, things related to free will and moral realism, they strike me as like helpful fictions. It's kind of like an arena we participate in. It's not necessarily real, but we can't exactly refrain from believing it, and we can't really stop ourselves from acting as though it's real. And that's a very boring answer, and it's like no one interesting gives that answer, but here I am giving the answer, and um, so that's generally the way that I would think about it. So yeah,
Usually, the things that you can't refrain from believing are that way because they're so obviously correct.
yeah. I mean, it could be. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, as far as like the evidential value of these intuitions, I think they're really important. As I said earlier, I think if I was more inclined to moral realism, I'd be more inclined to accept this kind of stuff. But given that like in my own worldview, like there's a general kind of assumption of like moral language and moral reality is kind of emotive in nature or something. I'm not as pulled to think that we must cling on to the rationality of people or that people are objectively good or objectively bad. I'm not as pulled to hold on to that. And so when I see stuff like, yeah, we do things because of weaker desires, those stronger ones are present. For what reason? And I'm like, that seems weird. Seems very strange. And so when I'm weighing up the intuitions, it just kind of as a side, like literally everything else in the universe is deterministic, right? And so, like, why are we the exception? And so I'm not weighing them up. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, we know that we're different from other things in the universe because we're conscious, and I assume that we know that non-living things are not conscious.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Us and the other conscious animals.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that and that well, if your consciousness affects something in the physical world, that is a different mode of operation from everything else.
yeah. So no, I think that we are starkly from everything else in the universe. But I would wonder if like we're relevantly different with respect to the issue of determinism. You know what I mean? Like I wonder if consciousness has like anything to do with our ability to be indeterministic in nature. You know what I mean? Like maybe, but I'm not quite sure. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have an account of how free will works. Nobody has much of an account, but I think it has something to do with consciousness influencing the physical world in this top-down way.
Yeah.
So, instead of just like the particles in your brain determining everything that happens, there's also conscious experiences and decisions and whatever
Hmm.
mental states, which then influence the brain.
Yeah.
It has
For
something to do with that.
yeah, for sure. I think it's a really good segue into the topic about consciousness. Mm. I'm really interested in consciousness. I think it's a little bit trendy nowadays to like get into panpsychism and stuff. I'm
So
kind of interested in
all the
in that.
cool kids on the block, are panpsychists.
Emerson Graham and Philip Goff and all that. Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, if I'm interested in your view specifically, I've listened to you talk about it before, but I'd like more clarity too. So, I mean, maybe you can present your view and other views with respect to consciousness, and yeah, go for it.
Well, I guess I'm a substance dualist, as they call us. There are two things. the mind and the body, or there's the mental and the physical. And the mind has certain kinds of properties called mental properties, and the body has physical properties. And
Mm.
okay, and there's some kind of interaction between them. So there's some kind of psychophysical laws, like
Yeah.
laws of nature, whereby when some kind of physical event happens, then a mental event happens. Nobody knows what the psychophysical laws are.
Hmm.
Must be some. People sometimes ask about, like, oh, how could the physical world affect the mental world, or vice versa?
Hmm.
And there's two ways of taking this. One way of taking this is like, tell me what the psychophysical laws are. Okay, so I don't know them, but I
Hmm.
don't know why there can't be such
Yeah,
laws, or
for
why
sure.
they couldn't be discovered. The other way of taking it is, no, explain to me why psychophysical laws exist at all.
Hmm.
And I don't have an answer to that either, but
Yeah.
I don't know why
I
the
think you
law of
need to.
gravity exists,
Mhm.
or the laws of electromagnetism. I don't know why any of the fundamental laws of nature exist either, but that
Hmm.
doesn't stop me from believing in them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it's interesting because like with and I I suppose that there's definitely respectable proponents of some identity theorists or some reductionists. But I'm reductionist with a bunch of other things, but with this, I'm absolutely not. So I'm kind of on board with what you're saying 100%. But that reductionism does not carry over to this conversation. And so, but what do you have any words to say on like views that identify mind with matter or eliminate mind completely or things like that?
I mean, I just think that's crazy.
Case.
I'm aware of my own mind. Like Descartes was right.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I couldn't be wrong about.
Yeah.
Not be wrong about being a conscious being. I think, therefore I am. I think really meant something like I'm conscious.
Hmm.
I'm having some kind of mental conscious experiences.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. I mean, what the eliminative materialists say, like they don't make it sound as crazy as just, yep, we're not conscious. they'll, they'll
Yeah.
say something about how, well, when you have a completed cognitive science, it is not going to use categories like belief and desire and whatever, fear and anger and all these sort of folk psychological categories, because it will turn out that the brain states that you're having when you say that you're in these different states maybe will not be a single brain state.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll just sort of be cross-cutting categories, and the brain categories will be the ones that are really explanatory and useful in science, and the categories that we're using in folk psychology will turn out to be
Hmm.
less useful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not completely useless, but they'll turn out to be less useful, and then we'll just throw them out because we all have the completed science. And so
Yeah.
then, in the completed science, you will not say that people have beliefs or desires or feelings. All right. So I think that's like
Yeah.
more the way they would put it, which makes it sound less crazy. You know,
Yeah.
I just think, yeah, but like I'm directly aware of experiences.
Hmm.
Like I'm aware of the way it feels. So, if the different occasions on which I feel angered don't have something in common in my brain, I don't care. Like that doesn't make me think that there isn't something common in the experience.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, I've heard this now. It's kind of weird because I've heard this computer analogy thrown around a lot, and I don't really know how to respond to it. I mean, I sympathize with everything that you're saying, but I'll have a physicalist or materialist come to me and say something like, "Well, maybe our brains are just computers. Maybe consciousness is just like what's ever on the screen of the computer or whatever." And I'm not exactly sure how to respond to that. Like, how do you exactly respond to
Who or what is looking at the screen then
that?
in this analogy?
Yeah.
Um,
For
The screen's looking
um,
out. So
and, there's some sense in which you could say that everything is a computer. Sure. All right. I mean, if you have this broad sense, right, you don't mean just this thing that I have in front of me right now. You're using a
Yeah.
broader sense of computer where,
Hmm.
okay, I don't know, like what is the sense? I don't know, thing that follows rules or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Then, okay, well then everything is a computer, so then I'm a computer.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I'm not conscious though.
Yeah, no, for sure. I
Like,
suppose they would like draw an analogy between like whatever's on the screen and our conscious experience because like it's not like there's literally a banana like there on the screen. It's a bunch of zeros and ones type thing, you know.
Good, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and let me try to help them out and sort of like make it let, sound less silly, right? So, yeah, maybe when I asked, "Oh, who's looking at the screen?" They go, "Okay, sorry." There's, it's like the memory in your computer, right?
mhm.
There's RAM chips or whatever, and there's just like a bunch of information stored in them. And maybe in your brain, there's something that is storing information in a similar way. And just when certain information gets stored in the right place in the right way, then you call that conscious experience. Um, okay.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how this is an argument for like the non-existence of experiences
Yeah.
or something. Like I know that I'm having experiences. Now may I don't know what's happening in my brain. Like okay, so like when I feel anger, I don't know what's happening in my brain. Something's happening in my brain. Suppose I find out what it is. So what?
Mhm.
So I find
Yeah.
out what's happening in my brain, and then I think that I'm not feeling anger?
Yeah,
No,
no, for sure.
I
Yeah.
do not think that.
Yeah, perhaps there's just a relevant difference between a screen and what it's like to be me. They're just not the same. They're not analogous in any way.
I mean, there's the difference that the computer screen is not conscious. There's that difference.
That is the difference. So
Unless
okay.
it's a 2001: A Space Odyssey. In that case, no.
You know.
Yeah. But I mean, so now that we've successfully ruled out material, I suppose. So what would you do if we found out that everything wasn't material, but it was conscious? Literally everything was conscious, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you think about that?
Like, I'm not sure this is even coherent because, like, it presupposes that, well, like, there's such a thing as everything. So, everything. So then that presupposes that nature has a privileged individuation of things. Okay, so like, okay, so this pencil is this conscious? Okay, well, what about the tip of the pencil? This part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, what about what if I come up with a word that referred to the pencil and the pad of paper joined together?
Is that
Is that
conscious?
a conscious being? They don't have to be touching, by the way, in order for this word to apply to it. So then, is that conscious? You're like, okay, I don't know. Are there 2 to the n minus 1 conscious beings, where n is the number of particles, elementary particles in the universe?
Yeah.
But okay, but anyway, I don't know. Maybe there would be some better answer to that. Um, okay, but I also want to suggest this is the panpsychist view. I don't know how that hypothesis helps with anything, like how it helps with explaining any evidence. So we
Yeah.
know that we're conscious, and then if you say that atoms are conscious, how does that help explain how we're conscious?
Yeah.
So like the 3 of us are each conscious, but that doesn't mean that there's an entity that contains the 3 of us that is itself conscious.
Hmm.
So, okay, so even if each of our atoms was conscious, that wouldn't explain why we're conscious,
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
right? And then you have to say something to explain like how we're conscious, and whatever you say about that, it seems like, well, you could probably say that without embracing panpsychism.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I think there's like tons of different views out there, and like I'm not as well read in this as many people, and so like just correct me when I say something really stupid. But like, I mean, I suppose many panpsychists wouldn't say that like the pencil itself is conscious, right? I mean, and they probably wouldn't say like the notepad is conscious. They probably certainly wouldn't say the combination of the notepad and the pencil is conscious. But they would say everything just is consciousness. Like that is the intrinsic
Or
nature of.
the fundamental stuff that makes up the notepad or something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah,
Whatever the
yeah.
fundamental stuff is. I think that's what I've heard Goff say.
Yeah, just something along those lines. And with respect to explanation,
Well,
I suppose it might. One thing that I've heard, I'm not really sure how to think about this. 'Cause I'm not like I don't really think about science that much, but I mean, like there's a question about like what the intrinsic nature of matter actually is, right? And so the idea is science tells us what things do, not what things are. Right. And so, like, if we ask why something is, we're going to appeal to what other things do. Right. And so, if you ask, like, well, what is an electron? Then you're just going to talk about, like, what the fundamental parts of an electron do. And that just is an electron. Right. But, like, we don't actually get to the identity of what a thing is. And so, I think Philip Goff's move and other people, they say, well, we're just going to fill in the gap with consciousness. And that would be kind of a pen. So, what do you think about all this? This is crazy to me. Like, what do you think? Not crazy, but bad, but interesting.
so I mean, I haven't really read this stuff, so I don't actually
I'm
know
sorry.
what these
Yeah.
views are. So
Yeah.
I'm probably going to be attacking a straw man. Um, okay. The idea that the fundamental stuff is conscious, is that like, does that mean each elementary particle is conscious? Something like that?
There's. I'm not exactly. I shouldn't speak for them perfectly,
I
but
don't want to speak for. Yeah, I don't want to attack a straw man either.
each particle would be a unit of consciousness,
Yeah.
right? So it's not like there's like this little ball that is an electron, and inside of it is consciousness, and there's a fact about like what it's like to be that thing. It just the whole thing just is consciousness. I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, maybe consciousness is a kind of substance, right? It doesn't seem like it's a substance, but anyway, like maybe there's a substance and then you get enough of it together and then into a person and then you get sort of like a higher kind of consciousness. Um,
yeah,
I mean, there have to be some story about um, the way that the particles are arranged, in particular in this brain, that
yeah,
gives rise to something like something special that's not happening with other material objects with the same number of particles in them.
yeah,
And my thought is like whatever you say about what's special about this brain arrangement, you could probably say that without saying that the particles are conscious.
yeah,
Now, I don't know for certain that you could do that. Like
yeah,
maybe the theory would involve somehow like it amplifies the degree of consciousness that's already present in the individual particles, and then if it was zero, then then you would get zero consciousness for the brain. But
yeah.
and then like maybe there could be some overall theory that explains
Hmm.
everything. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then I guess like yeah, I don't have any evidence that electrons aren't conscious, but I don't see how there could be evidence that they are. I mean, I see how there could be evidence that they are, but
Yeah. Yeah.
electrons could be behaving intelligently or something.
Wait, do you want
Um,
to go over like objections to substance dualism, or what are you thinking?
Hmm. I'm not sure. I mean, I kind of sympathize with it. I'm not really. Maybe y'all could lay out some popular objections and address them. That's an idea. I, I suppose before we do that, I mean, my only worry is, of course, why is it that X arrangement of matter produces, consciousness? But and you said that we don't have a story for that, but we don't need one necessarily. It's I don't exactly know why this feels like a right answer, but it kind of seems right to plug in God here. But
Sorry,
but
say again. It seems right.
it seems right to plug in God at this point.
Hmm.
But anyways, what are some objections to substantialism and what I said?
I mean, I, I think the most popular thing that people say is there's a puzzle about explaining the mind-body interaction.
Yeah,
And they'll say like, oh well, if the mental world is just completely different from the physical world, then it's a puzzle how it could influence the physical world. And then sometimes people say there's this principle called the causal closure of physics, which is that the physical world is not affected by anything non-physical, right? And I feel like people just think that by giving it a fancy sounding name, like they did something other than making this
true.
question. But no, the
Yeah,
causal closure of physics is just like asserting the denial of my view. Most dualists are interactionists, so it's just the denial of interactionism, interaction
yeah,
dualism. Um, but anyway, and then I'm like, no, I don't know why that's a puzzle. Like, in some sense, it's true that we don't know why mental events should cause anything in the physical world, or vice versa,
yeah,
and it might not be possible to know that. But
yeah,
I also think that that's true about all of the fundamental laws of physics. We don't know why they obtain. We just get the evidence and find out what they are, and that's
yeah,
that's all we ever do.
yeah.
So okay, anyway, so like I didn't think that that was a great objection, but I think a better objection that I was thinking of was, um, animals evolved over time from simpler organisms to more complex ones. If you talk to a dualist, they will probably tell you that they think there are plenty of animals that are not conscious, including animals that have some kind of nervous system. So, like the dualist will probably tell you that clams are not conscious. They do have nerves, but they do not have a brain. And there was like a continuous relatively continuous development over evolutionary history from organisms that didn't have any nervous system, like whatever. It starts from single-celled organisms, but they have some way of controlling their behavior. And then you get these nerves that can control the behavior a little bit more, like with a clam, and they're like ganglia or whatever. And then it
Mm.
gets more complex after that until, at some point you get a central nervous system. But that will still be with like really small organisms that you probably don't think are conscious, like
Hmm.
ants. But then it just gets progressively more complex and it gets to us. And then we think we're definitely conscious. Okay, and then you wonder at what point consciousness appeared. And like the dualist story is, oh, there are these psychophysical laws that tell you that when you get to a certain degree of complexity in this process, then consciousness appears, a qualitatively different phenomenon appears,
Yeah.
which happens to be useful for controlling the behavior of the organism. And it's such a coincidence that there was this mechanism that evolution was developing for controlling organisms. And then when it gets complicated enough, then there just happen to be psychophysical laws that create a qualitatively different thing that's also useful for the same purpose.
Hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, the psychophysical laws could have been anything, I
Yeah.
guess. Like, it's just a coincidence. We happen to come upon the arrangement that makes consciousness to appear.
Yeah. Yeah. That I don't know. That kind of thing strikes me as some evidence for something a little bit weird, maybe some supernatural stuff. I'm not sure. John, you want to say something?
I was gonna say, well, how because he comes up all the time. Phineas Gage, Doctor Huemer. How should a substance dualist think about Phineas Gage? And maybe you could tell the audience the story of Phineas Gage.
Yeah, I'm not aware of who this is. So.
Yeah, I mean, what I know is like he had a serious accident. Um, what? Don't play with dynamite.
So what is the context?
So the story, like he was like I think like a railroad worker or something back in the day, and there was
Yeah.
some dynamite explosion that went horribly wrong, and a
I think
spike.
there's like a hole, and he's like
Spike.
tamping something down in the
Yeah,
hole,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
dynamite in the
tell me about
bottom,
this. Okay.
and then there's an explosion, and
And
this
the
spike
spike.
flies up through his head.
Okay. All right.
So
But
part of
it,
his
yeah, I was gonna say it
so
changed his personality.
there's a localized injury, so part of his brain is destroyed, but the rest of it is okay, and then it just completely changes his personality.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that supposed to be? Do people think that's an objection to dualism, or?
Um, I don't know. I mean, like physicalists will say things like they will talk about just how um, doing stuff to the brain affects your mind, and then I guess the identity theorists think like, oh, that supports the identity theory. If there was a separate mind with separate mind stuff, then I guess they think that that means that what happens in your mind should be independent, largely independent of what happens in your brain.
Yeah.
It may be damaging. You should be able to continue thinking even if your brain is damaged.
Hmm. It's probably like some evidence for identity theory, but like we just know that like there's like just intuitively. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's interesting. On what was the first objection you gave to substance dualism? I was going to say a few things on that. What was
So
that?
like the causal closure of physics and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've listened to you and Emerson Green talk about it, and like I really kind of sympathize with what y'all say, right? Because I mean, I just why could they not interact? I don't understand. I know y'all talked about how there is a view of causality out there where objects have to literally touch each other or something, but we all know that that's not how causality has to work. And so yeah, I don't know.
Well, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah, I mean, there's a big thing, maybe in like the 17th century, where people had a problem with action at a distance. This came up because of Newton's theory of gravity, because like he had no mechanism for mediating the interaction between distant bodies. So like the
Mhm.
sun is pulling on the earth, and then there's nothing,
Yeah,
nothing in between them. And people
yeah,
thought
yeah.
this was weird. And as a matter of fact, well, in a way, you could say that action at a distance was eliminated. Okay, temporarily was eliminated in physics because we posited a thing called the gravitational field, which is everywhere. So Okay, so there's
Yeah.
action at a distance, and if you move an object, so there's a massive body and it affects the gravitational field, and if you move it, then that creates a change in the gravitational field. But that change in the gravitational field itself spreads out at the speed of light. It's not instantaneous.
Hmm.
So if you move something on the sun, that will cause a change in the gravitational field that the Earth experiences, but not immediately. It would be
Yeah.
like 8 minutes later or whatever, however long it
Hmm.
takes. Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, yeah, no action at a distance sounds reasonable. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, but then I said that it was action at a distance was eliminated temporarily because then there's this stuff in quantum mechanics where it's just kind of provable that there's action at a distance, instantaneous.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
this is
It,
the Bell's theorem stuff.
yeah. That's fair. I mean, yeah. So here's this going back to what you said earlier. I mean, here's an idea. So on one theory, let's say a naturalistic theory, we have an evolutionary history, and at some point, psychophysical laws arise, and all of a sudden, there's consciousness for reasons, whatever the might be. Another theory is that somebody gave us consciousness, and he, instilled psychophysical laws. Is that some evidence for the second theory? Perhaps.
Yeah, the existence of consciousness is some evidence for God.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
is it really strong evidence? Probably not really strong. I don't know. So the thought
Yeah.
is, yeah, like if there were a God, would God want there to be consciousness? Okay, we don't know for certain, but it's not implausible.
Mm.
Plausible that if there were a supreme being, then it would desire consciousness. Um, you don't know that much about God. Like it's just a hypothesis. We haven't met God. Um, but it is still plausible because like you could think of a lot of purposes for which having conscious beings around would be good.
Yeah.
And purposes that kind of, I don't know, a priori make sense. Like, I don't know, if you value goodness or something like a lot of the stuff that's good. If you believe in moral value in the first place, um,
Yeah.
most of the things that are morally good require consciousness to exist.
Yeah. For
Then
sure.
you're like, okay, and then the other thing that you should think, this is like, we're thinking in Bayesian terms here. So the other question we should ask is if there's no God, then is it likely that there would be consciousness? Seems unlikely.
Yeah.
I don't know how to estimate. By the way, you never know how to estimate these probabilities.
Yeah.
You don't know how to put numbers on them, but actually, I would say it's totally bizarre that there's consciousness.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
it's totally unexpected, right?
Yeah.
Except for the fact that we're conscious, so we have to expect it. But
Yeah.
so yeah, it is evidence for God, right? But
Yeah.
but I mean, there's the problem that it's not great evidence because like the God hypothesis doesn't make very sharp predictions.
Okay. For sure.
Without more detail about what God is like, right? It's hard to make definite predictions about what he would want. And like the cases in science where a theory got definitely accepted really
Hmm.
require pretty sharp predictions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there'd be things like, oh, okay, how do people become convinced of the theory of gravity? Which, the issue was not whether things fall to the ground.
Hmm.
The issue was whether the force that's making the moon orbit the Earth and the Earth orbit the sun was the same as the force that's making things fall to the ground here when you drop them.
Yeah.
There's a really good argument for that, which is like, okay, Newton had figured out what Newton's laws of motion were,
Hmm.
and then he hypothesized that there could be an inverse square law for gravitational attraction, and the distance of the moon from the Earth was known. So then you could calculate the amount of force that would be on the moon at that distance. And you could
Hmm.
also calculate the amount of force that was required, given Newton's laws of motion and knowing like the orbit, you could calculate how much force was required to keep the moon in that circular path, and those are the same number.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's really strong evidence, and this just to illustrate that usually when a theory gets confirmed in a really convincing way, there's some like quantitative prediction that turns out
Yeah.
to be right, which we don't really have for the God hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. No, me and John, we were talking earlier. We were wondering if you were an agnostic, or if you were an atheist, or if you're an agnostic, what kind of agnostic? Like, what is your perspective? Like, what do you don't? I don't hear you talk about it much on the internet, or so.
I don't know why people don't ask me about it very much.
Well, here we are. We're uh,
I mean, I guess I'm agnostic because, like, there are arguments for the existence of God that are reasonable, or I guess I would say intelligent design. So I think the fine tuning argument is a reasonable argument. And that thing that you were just saying about the existence of consciousness, I mean, that's closely related to that. So
mhm.
the fine tuning is just sort of more about why it's improbable that there would be consciousness.
Yeah.
Why it's improbable that there would be life, that's the way it's standardly described, but also in
Mhm.
particular consciousness, if there wasn't an intelligent designer. Okay, but at the same time, I think there's a pretty strong evidence. There's pretty strong evidence against it, which is like all of the horrible shit that's going on in the world. And,
Yeah.
and it's just sort of like, okay, you can come up with reasons why a designer might allow horrible shit. You can come up with why the seemingly horrible things might be good, but you can't. There isn't any theory that gives you an actual prediction that looks like it's matching reality. Okay, so
Mm.
like, suppose you say, oh, the reason is it's the soul making theodicy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we need suffering to build our characters. Okay, so then what that should predict is you would expect the optimal suffering, the optimal amount and kind of suffering to be happening to people to build their characters. But that is not what we observe as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a lot of the suffering is actually making people worse. A lot of the times, right, people go through horrible shit and then they become terrible people. And, so, and
Still
then,
soul destroying, right?
yeah, and when you look at it, there just doesn't seem to be a pattern to it, right? The suffering and the bad stuff just seems to be happening just the way it would be if there was nobody watching,
Yeah.
as far as we can tell. And so, like, it's not impossible. Like, that's not incompatible with there being an intelligent designer, but it's not really what you would expect.
Yeah. John, do you have any words to say? Because I know you have a lot of things to say
Um,
on.
let's see. Well, how are we doing on time before I ask Dr. Humor any questions? Like, I don't.
I'm fine. Ask Dr. Huemer, how much time do you have?
I, I don't got anywhere to be, so yeah.
All right, we're chilling.
I'm curious. You mentioned soul building. I'm curious what you think of responses to the problem of evil that incorporate, even like we talked about earlier, libertarian free will. Um, like the
Yes.
idea of, or perhaps the idea of maybe if there is a God, perhaps God wanted to create the type of world where libertarian free will is possible, and maybe not necessarily that we need all like the natural evil and suffering that's going on, but perhaps those are like accidental byproducts of living in the type of world where libertarian free will is possible. Curious what your thoughts are on the odysseys like that, like
Oh, okay.
if
Okay,
that
so I
makes
guess
sense.
I'm gonna want more about that last part, but I mean, yeah, my initial reaction is, oh yeah, okay, so that could explain some of the evils in the world. It just doesn't appear to explain, I guess most of them. But I mean, here's a story that I like to tell sometimes. I don't know.
Sorry.
Suppose that there is a serial killer, living up in the mountains, and he's like periodically kidnapping people and taking them there and torturing them and then murdering them. And suppose that he has exactly one neighbor who's within eyesight of his compound, and that's me. And I see
Yo.
this person dragging bodies, whatever, taking bodies out of the house into the woods or whatever. Um, and I never say anything. I don't do anything about it. Okay, and then eventually the police catch up with this serial killer. All the police descend on his house, they arrest him, and then they come and interview me, and they're like, Professor Humer, did you know what was going on in your neighbor's house? And I go, yep, I knew everything. Like,
Real.
okay, wow. Were you, did you know that you could just easily stop this? Or speaking of the phone, I'm like, yep, I could have stopped it at any time. And they're like, wow, are you like some kind of sicko that you like people to be murdered? And I'm
Oh,
like,
I'm perfect.
no,
I'm perfect.
I love everyone very much. I'm maximally
Literally
loving.
not flawed at all.
I love all of those victims. Okay, and then they're like, then what the fuck is the matter with you? And I say, I didn't want to interfere with the murderer's free will. Okay, because
No,
free
that's
will
no,
is
that's
not
fair.
enough.
Uh,
It's like, okay, I do believe in the value of free will.
I've heard you
So,
use that Did you? I think we talked about that exact thing on the last podcast. That's so funny. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I believe in the value of free will, but there's a limit. Right? Like,
for real.
I would not give people freedom when they go past a certain point.
Before I ask any questions, Wade, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think what he said is correct. um, I kind of want you to expound upon a theodicy that you
Sure.
have about natural evil. So,
Well, no, I was gonna say like Dr. Huemer's point about like not intervening when the serial killer's doing stuff. That gets into
yeah,
debates on like if there's a God, what are God's moral obligations to human beings? Like, is there would his obligations or her obligations, their obligations, look different than human moral obligations? Like, obviously, I think Dr. Huemer would have an obligation to stop that serial killer if he has the
yeah,
power to, and not go, well, he seems like I just want him to have the chance to morally develop, and maybe he
yeah.
won't kill this time. But
So,
I, but
yeah.
that we could talk about what God's moral obligations are if God
No,
exists,
that's good.
or
So yeah, so one thing is the effects of God intervening might be different from the effects of me intervening.
yeah,
If God intervenes, that might cause people to expect that God is going to prevent bad things in the future. If I do, that is not going to cause people to think that. Right? And that might be relevant because maybe God wants us to sort of like develop our capacities, develop our
yeah.
virtues, and so on to deal with adversity.
My thoughts are that if there is a God and He wants us to have significant moral freedom to some extent, uh, that He's going to operate at an epistemic distance to some degree, and sometimes grotesque evils will just emerge from that picture because if he is operating in a hands-off sort of way to allow for libertarian freedom, it's not necessarily that he wants like it's not necessarily like, yeah, it's great that the libertarian or the serial killer has the libertarian freedom to kill a bunch of people. The good would actually be the good of being in a world where libertarian freedom is possible and God is operating at an epistemic distance to allow us to develop our moral characters or virtues, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be necessarily, oh, it's great that that serial killer is freely doing X, Y, or Z and God's not intervening? That wouldn't necessarily be the good. The good would be like the fact that, we live in a world where that kind of freedom exists in the first place, if that makes sense.
I mean, I'm not seeing really why you can't have a world where that kind of freedom exists, but periodically you stop people from doing the worst things. You see what I mean?
No, that's,
I mean, and I take it that most religious people believe that God does perform miracles sometimes,
yeah.
and then so it seems like, well, what if he like performed a miracle so that Hitler died before the Holocaust? Right. And by the way, like he could just have a heart attack. Nobody would know that anything happened. Like, nobody would even know that God did it.
No,
And
that's fair, and I don't want to necessarily defend the uh, the good of Adolf Hitler's free will. I think it was Michael Roos, the philosopher Michael Roos, was in a debate with a Christian philosopher, and he said something to the effect of, "I don't think it was worth it for Adolf Hitler to have free will. Like, I don't think it was worth it for."
well,
Um, and for
no,
me, Wade, you want to talk about my theodicy for moral evil, or you want me to? I can
So,
elaborate more.
so I do have one thought, and then we can go into that because that's very interesting. I mean, like, I think so. I generally agree that too much freedom is bad. Like some things you just shouldn't have the free will to do. Like full stop. I do think it's helpful to pin down a relevant difference between us and God. This is something that I've been trying to like formulate, and it's still in the works. But I was talking to my friend Ben about this today. I mean, so okay, so when Doctor Huemer is in the position where he could stop the serial killer, and he doesn't, um, he has an obligation. Precisely. Well, God's also in a position where he can stop the serial killer, right? See me. I'm not sure about the serial killer case, but let's take a less extreme case. Let's say someone's robbing a store or something. Because serial killer is like that's insane. So like, let's say someone's robbing a store, and God could prevent that from happening, but he decides not to. So God is in a situation where he is responsible for ensuring goods that would otherwise be unattainable, right? You're not in that situation, right? Like you're not responsible for ensuring certain kinds of good, like courage and love and different things like that, and bravery. Um, but he is the origin of the universe. He is the foundation. He literally has that responsibility to ensure these goods, and no one else has that responsibility to ensure. And so this might provide some relevant difference between us and God. Now, this does not address some insane examples of
Like the
serial killers,
Holocaust or the Holocaust.
right?
Um,
But it could address a few others. So I don't know. That's a thought.
my point with the type of world where we have libertarian free will, I made a comment or something to the effect of perhaps if God were to make a world where humans possess significant moral freedom like libertarian free will, perhaps, and he operates at an epistemic distance, perhaps you could reasonably predict that certain evils that seem gratuitous at face value would just emerge. Like if we live in a world that God is operating at an epistemic distance and humans have libertarian free will, sometimes serial killers might just do evil things because there's a little bit of randomness that's involved if God's operating at an epistemic distance. I'm curious about your thoughts on that. I'm not saying that it addresses the Holocaust per se, but
Yeah.
at least particular instances of evil where it's like God is too good, said he wants to, pursue libertarian free will and, the good of us, being moral agents with each other and developing certain moral character. But if God wants those two goods, us forming our moral character and free will, he has to operate at an epistemic distance to some degree. Because if he intervened, you know, every time we freely did something wrong, that would take away from our moral development or something along those lines. Curious on your thoughts.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, yeah, I mean, this is plausible up to a certain level of evils, right?
sure.
Like, yeah, like, if you have a kid, like, you should let your kid make some mistakes, but you should not let him, like, play on the freeway too much.
Really.
And it just seems like, no, we're allowed to do everything. It seems like there's no limit. By the way, like, I have a proposed theodicy that, traditional theists don't like, which is
Oh,
that,
okay.
well, God isn't really all powerful.
I was about to bring that up. That's so great.
Yeah, the designer is just
Phase.
very powerful, but not all powerful. And then you might think, oh yeah, but like, how powerful do you have to be to
Sure.
just do something? We don't even see God doing anything. you know, Bill Gates
Wait,
has saved more people than God has, as far as I'm
wait.
right.
Should we run the that what was it? The premortalist free will defense. Get Doctor Huemer's thought on that. It's kind of wild, and it's a
so, Jo-
experimental philosophy of religion. It's
John sends me like 12,000 paragraphs he ran by ChatGPT, and I was like, dude, I do not have time to read all this. So
oh
please,
no.
please run it by
So
Dr. Humer.
Doctor Huemer, there was a paper that was published. I think it was in Religious Studies last summer. It was like the premortalist free will defense. It's a very it's going to sound very out there and harebrained, but I'm just going to run it by you anyway. So the idea is like uh, we have like this pre-mortal state, like pre-embodied existence, where like all of like the souls of all the people who will ever live are like God talks to these people about embodied life, like a life that they'll live, where there'll be all this suffering, but they'll experience like moral development, and maybe one day they'll have like embodied perfect life with God for all eternity, whatever. And so in the premortalist free will defense, God only creates embodied agents who freely consent to coming into a world where there are going to be serial killers that Dr. Humer sees that he needs to stop, like a world like that, or a world where the Holocaust happens. But the only agents who come into this world are those who freely consent to knowing that there's going to be a lot of horrible stuff. But I don't know what the mechanics are. Like they forget once they live embodied life, like their distant eternity past is forgotten or some way, shape, or form. But the philosopher in the paper argued that that could at least provide like a logical possible account for you know
Mm.
the evil that we see. So it's the idea of everyone
Yeah,
who
yeah,
exists consented to come into the world at some point, into a world
yeah,
where all this crazy stuff, all this horrible stuff is going to happen.
yeah. Um, But,
It's a
I
wild
mean,
paper, by the way.
but, and yeah, I mean, think like, okay, this sounds like an empirical claim, but like, there's no empirical evidence for it. Like, what if I find somebody who seems like they really wouldn't consent to that? Like, I
Hmm.
talk to somebody and I tell them this story, and they're like, I would never have agreed to that. And then you just be like, well, you just don't know. You've forgotten that you did agree. Um,
That,
but
that would seem to be some evidence against that, but
okay, but so that could, let's say, it would address the potential rights violation.
yeah.
Like maybe you worry that God would be violating our rights by letting horrible things happen to us. And so then maybe he's not violating our rights because we consented. But that still doesn't explain like why he should have all of this horrible stuff happening. Like why not just give us a really good world? Like, seems like that would
Well,
be better, and like he's a perfect being, so he would just do the best thing.
well, that defense doesn't necessarily expand on that, but I have a thought that I've run by Wade before that I'll run by you, where theologians sometimes talk about like, if there is a God, God is uniquely perfect. Has all the omni attributes, omnipresence, omniscience, omnipotence, all that jazz. But God's attribute of perfection, some theologians argue that that is an incommunicable attribute, meaning that can only be shared by God. It's not something that uh, created contingent reality could possess. And so some theologians will argue that any world that God creates, even if it's a really good world, by necessity, won't be perfect if God's attribute of perfection isn't something that can be shared with um, created contingent reality. And so some theologians will argue that if you have that as part of your framework in tandem with things like the value of libertarian free will and soul making, you could reasonably predict, and God operating at an epistemic distance, then you could reasonably predict that certain evils would emerge in the world that appear to be gratuitous because it might be a good world, but it won't be a perfect world by virtue of the
Yes.
created world not sharing in perfection. I'm curious what your thoughts would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
on that.
I mean, it seems like we have complaints that go beyond the world just not being perfect.
Yeah, yeah,
It seems
that's
like
fair.
it's not even very good. As a matter of fact, I have sometimes wondered whether it's better than nothing. Like I
Mhm.
sometimes wondered whether the value of the world is positive or negative. Um, and you can think about this when you think about like, okay, we are extremely lucky. Most people throughout almost all of human history were living in just really shitty conditions, like as we would describe it. You know, I recall this comment from David Schmitz where he was talking about how in the Middle Ages you'd be wondering about whether you can afford to bury your child in his own shirt, or whether you have to save that shirt for his younger brother.
Mm.
So, and today we're worrying about whether we can afford a second car. Right?
Mhm.
Okay. But anyway, throughout history, most people had stuff like that. Like, your kid has just died of the plague, but you still have to go out and feed the cows. Otherwise, the other kid is going to die too. And so, okay. Anyway, and then
No,
you're
no,
like,
fair.
actually, we're lucky to be human at all because like the lives of most conscious beings are just like, there's
Yeah.
constant shortage and scarcity. Whatever. Okay. Anyway. Um, okay. Anyway, but okay. This is my suggestion for the imperfect creator
Sure.
theodicy, which is look. I mean, like it's hard to see. It's sort of like hard to give an explanation of why the creator is allowing suffering that sort of gets it to look the way that it does. Because the way that it looks is as if nobody's doing anything. The way it looks is that the suffering that's happening is just what would happen if there was nobody watching. Okay, but this is my explanation. You know how many stars there are? There are 10 to the 22 stars, or something like that, which is a lot. Let's say, you know, 10,000 million millions. You can't comprehend how big this is, but you get some sense when you look at there's this image called the Hubble Ultra Deep Field image, which is a picture taken by the Hubble Space Telescope by aiming it at a dark appearing portion of the night sky and taking a long exposure. And it's a portion of the night sky that you would cover up with your thumb if you held your hand out at arm's length. And the photograph, after a long exposure, reveals all of these little points of light, and they're all galaxies. There's like 10,000 galaxies in this tiny portion of the night sky that's like, less than a millionth of the night sky. Okay, so that's what there is in creation. By the way, all of human history is just like an eye blink compared to the history of the universe, which is, it's gone on for at least 14 billion years, but it might be infinite. And so, like, that's how it could be that even the biggest disaster on Earth is small, compared to the Creator, because the Creator has 10 to the 22 stars. Like, there's like 10,000 galaxies in this like tiny portion of the night sky, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that I want to like revisit something you alluded to earlier, but I want to unpack it. The limited God, right? Because I think that's just like that's really plausible because we do have evidence for God as you said a minute ago. But like we have pretty good evidence that it's not perfect. um, but
Well, you could have a limited God with moral perfection who may not have omnipotence in like the classical sense.
that's what I'm saying, right? So maybe God's not powerful enough to prevent some evils. I'm actually inclined to find that a little bit weird. I'm not quite sure how a God could create a universe but not prevent a girl from being drowned or something. It seems a little bit strange to me, but I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to limit its goodness. So maybe it is kind of mess with his motivations a little bit, but like maybe he's concerned with the goodness some of the time, but also maybe he kind of likes evil some of the time too. Maybe he's like a normal person like we are or something, but he's just super powerful. That seems to account for the data kind of well. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the moral imperfection theory, because then it's like, I mean, but there's no pattern to the evils
Yeah.
that he allows or doesn't allow. If there was a pattern to it, then we could posit a personality trait that would explain it. There are people who have moral flaws, but they will be specific. It won't be that they're just like every once in a while, totally at random.
Yeah, yeah,
They let something bad happen. It won't be that it just looks like they're never doing anything. Okay, but you're like, okay, yeah, why can't God stop a child from drowning? Well, he could, but he's got 10 to 22 stars. Like, everything that happens here is tiny.
yeah,
And there's an ant in this ant colony that is having a hard time struggling with this piece of rice that it's trying to take home. Why don't you help that ant?
yeah,
Not because you can't. Like,
yeah.
you have bigger things.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I feel like even though there's like tons of stars, I feel like I don't know, like we matter a lot more than stars. And so, like, even though like we take up like a tiny portion of the universe, like
Yeah,
we're still
we matter
here.
more than the dead planets, right? The
Yeah,
planets are
and
just gas giants,
yeah,
um, but with 10 to the 22, there are probably many planets with life on them.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I wonder if like maybe like the evidence that God cares about us is leaving like the back of our minds a little bit because I mean there is the phenomenon of fine tuning, there is consciousness, it is, and I think other kinds of things
Yeah.
are evidence too, right? So like I mean we talked about this in our last podcast, Dr. Huemer. Like I mean I think if moral knowledge exists, then that seems to be strong evidence for God. There's other things like psychophysical harmony and stuff like that, and these kinds of things, it seems like at the very least the universe is a battle.
Can
It's
I
not indifferent. It
can
would
I
be
add?
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was
There you go.
gonna. I wanted to say like, um, Dr. Humer, if let's say like a theist takes like the following phenomena, the fact that we have conscious experience, um, the reality of like religious experiences, the fine tuning for life, the fact that we have moral knowledge, like all these various phenomena, and they form a story. They're like, if there's like a personal God, a good God, we could reasonably predict that our world would be, fine tuned for life, fine tuned for consciousness, fine tuned for moral knowledge, fine tuned to have free will, fine tuned to have religious experiences. But if what are your thoughts on like the theist going? yeah, but evil exists, and although I think all this phenomena is best explained by a theistic hypothesis, or if they make the move, this phenomena seems best explained by theism, but you can never have a perfect theory, so evil might just be something that we don't have a full answer for. They appeal to like skeptical theism or something. They go, we have all this data over here: religious experience, fine tuning, the reality of free will, the reality of moral knowledge, the reality of consciousness, and this all gives me evidence to believe that God is behind this, but we also have evil. And I don't know if my theism necessarily predicts evil well, but because of my belief in God that I think explains this other phenomena I mentioned, I'll just punt and say God has a morally sufficient reason, based on all this other phenomena that I think God explains. It gives me a justifying reason for thinking that there is some morally sufficient reason for all the seemingly meaningless evil, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I mean, this could be a rational thing to say. Yeah, like if you have strong evidence for the existence of God. I mean, so this is a thing that happens in science. There's some anomaly that you don't know how to explain,
Yeah.
but like within your current theories, but your current theory does explain a lot of stuff, so you feel like you're not abandoning the theory. Although that does generally mean, like historically, that there is something wrong with the theory, that the theory is actually false. And when you get the new theory that explains the anomaly, it will not necessarily be similar. Right? Like it'll be quantitatively close, but it might be qualitatively totally different in how it explains the data.
Sure.
But yeah, and then the other thing I think is, well, like what if somebody has the opposite attitude? They're like, no, the existence of consciousness is the anomaly. It's like,
Oh yeah.
um, and I don't know. Maybe there's some other explanation for fine tuning. You know,
Mm.
because if we're
I
being
yeah.
skeptical,
I don't think any of the phenomena I mentioned can like stiff arm someone into going, therefore God exists. I just think it's phenomena that could be reasonably interpreted in favor of a theistic hypothesis.
yeah,
But I don't think it's anything that would be like, you need to like put your arm behind your back and become a theist. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I guess so. I'm not a typical non-theist. So I could try to channel like what the typical atheist would say. Then they just like take all the things that you listed, and then they would have a different view about them. They would just say,
no,
no,
for
you're
sure.
totally wrong. They're like, okay, why is there life? Okay, we can't deny that life exists, but it's like the multiverse hypothesis or something.
Hmm.
And you're like, oh, why is there moral knowledge? And maybe they would say, oh, there's no moral knowledge. It's just like,
Real faith.
you know, it's human inclinations that we've labeled as morality. There's a certain subclass of our
Mm.
desires, whatever. Um,
Yeah, I suppose those moves would be legitimate sometimes, but like, I mean, there are responses to the multiverse. There are no good arguments against the existence of consciousness. And like, I don't know, maybe I mean, I'm sympathetic to the moral inferiority, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's completely fair. What you just
yeah,
said.
that's right. Yeah, I have a hard time sympathizing with the physicalists who um,
Sorry.
think there's either no consciousness or consciousness is just a type of brain state. Um,
Yeah.
I know what they would say, but I just wouldn't find it convincing. So,
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, I think the limited God stuff is starting to become very interesting. I think it's in line with what you were saying earlier about like when we, this anomaly is usually evidence that our theory is incorrect, and so when we revise it, it's a little bit qualitatively different or a lot qualitatively different. And I think maybe like it's perhaps at the foundation of reality is theistic, but like who knows what that is, and so
yeah.
I'm inclined to limit its moral perfection. Maybe it's interested in aesthetic, and maybe that could account for the Holocaust more than moral goodness. And so I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, don't
I
step on.
mean, okay, then you should expect a really beautiful universe.
Well,
Maximally
we live
beautiful.
in a really beautiful universe, kind of.
Yeah.
Like there's so many stars out
There's a
there.
lot of beauty, but there's a lot of ugly and disgusting things. I don't know. Oh, okay. The other comment I want to make that's apropos of philosophy of science is, yeah, when scientists do this thing where they say we're keeping the theory even though there's anomalies that we can't explain, there's usually evidence that's sort of like more impressive, or Yeah, as I said earlier in the conversation, there would be some sharp predictions where like some quantity gets predicted, the value of some variable gets predicted and then measured independently, and it turns out to match the predicted value. So like you have the theory of gravity. Famous example. You have Newton's theory of gravity, and it's explaining things falling near the surface of the Earth, also explaining the orbits of the moons of the different planets and the orbits of the planets around the sun, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then, there's this anomalous advance of the perihelion of Mercury, which is like this, it's a really small phenomenon. It's like the point in the orbit that's closest to the sun is the perihelion. And that point itself moves around the sun. Okay. And that is the case for Mercury's orbit. And I think all of the orbits. Anyway, and it was expected to move, but it moves a little bit faster than expected.
Mm-hmm.
That's the anomaly. And then you're like, I don't know. There's probably some explanation. It's probably not that our theory is completely wrong. And the
Yeah.
reason this seems reasonable is that, well, there's just a bunch of stuff that it precisely predicts.
Yeah.
Okay, and I understand that you're saying that, oh, well, okay, theism also kind of predicts a bunch of stuff. But I feel like it's not the same kind of, it's not
It's not.
equally impressive predictions, right? Because it's not specific enough. And
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds right. I mean, yeah. Is there anything else that you have in your mind, John? Or
With that one, that just comes down to a clash of intuitions too about certain things about like comparing something like the hypothesis of indifference from someone like Paul Draper compared to like theism as a hypothesis. It's like if indifference was at the heart of the universe, you could reasonably predict that there'd be mudslides that
yeah.
kill a bunch of people. You could reasonably predict that child cancer would exist or the Holocaust would happen, like because there's no benevolent mind beyond the universe, or you could predict
Mhm.
divine hiddenness and other things like that. And so
Yeah.
it's just when it comes to these debates, it's like you get into the weeds of, but could the hypothesis of indifference predict the existence of the fine tuning of the universe, or religious
like
experience, or
consciousness, yeah.
consciousness, and it you get down to the weeds, comparing and
Well, yeah.
contrasting,
No,
doing
well,
anomaly hunting as well.
no, like I definitely don't think that the indifference hypothesis predicts life or consciousness or morality, moral character. It doesn't predict any of those things. And it does make those things surprising. And I feel like, well, theism comes closer to predicting that, or predicts them more. But I don't feel like it's a really strong prediction because we don't know enough about what God would do.
Sure. Wade, did you want to
Yeah.
go into reincarnation or any of the or do you want to put a pin in it here, or what do you think?
Well, I'm down with whatever y'all are down with. Maybe we can go to like an hour and 45, maybe. And I gotta get food. I'm so freaking hungry. But yeah, incarnation. So elaborate your view, please.
Yeah, I mean um, um, so we talked about how you have an immaterial soul, right? Well, sometimes it's disembodied. So before your most recent birth, you existed as a disembodied soul, and then after you die, you're going to be a disembodied soul. But then later, you're going to be embodied in another body. Okay, so this is the reincarnation hypothesis. Just treat this as a hypothesis and evaluate it, in Bayesian terms. And the alternative hypothesis, let's assume, is that you can only live once. Okay, and then I also think that time is infinite in both directions. Both the past and the future are infinite. So if time is infinite, and if people could only live once in all of time, then what would be the probability that you would be alive now, specifically? And my claim is the probability is 0. But you are alive now, so that conclusively refutes the hypothesis that people can only live once. And so, okay, so the alternative is the reincarnation theory. Okay, good now. And why did I say the probability of being alive now would be 0? Well, roughly because, given the infinite past, there were infinite chances for you to have been born at an earlier time, which allegedly would have prevented you from being here now. And so then you should be here, right?
Yeah, if you get okay, so I read your Substack on this a little bit before preparing for this. So if you could expound upon the inference from the probability of you existing is zero, and you exist to therefore you will exist more than once.
Yeah.
I think I'm lost there. I don't understand. I don't get that.
Yeah, so the claim is if you could only live once, the probability that the one time you'd be alive would be now would be zero.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, and by the way, okay, so like one way that people, I don't know, sometimes think of this, but I think this is mistaken is, oh, let's just give an even probability distribution for all the times that you could be born. Okay, but there's infinite time. So the probability density function has to be zero. If it's even and it doesn't integrate to more than one, then it has to be, rho of t equals zero for all t. That's the only function that doesn't integrate to more than one that's uniform. Okay, and it has to integrate to one because, that's the total probability. So, okay, but in fact, I think that's not correct because the probability should not be uniform over time. Rather, it has to be non-increasing. So it can decrease over time, but it shouldn't go up. And the reason for that is your being born at any given time could prevent your being born at a later time, but not vice versa.
Okay.
So like an analogy I like to use is suppose that there's a coin and you plan to flip it some number of times until the first time it comes up heads, after which it will be permanently destroyed. Okay, and then what are the probabilities for the flip number on which it comes up heads? It will come up heads on some flip number n for some n. The first, okay, maybe it'll come up heads the first time and then destroy it, or maybe the second time. Okay, what's the probability distribution? Well, 50% chance that it'll be the first flip, 25% that it'll be the second, whatever, 1/8 chance that it'll be the third, and so on. So the probability decreases over time because anytime it happens prevents any further flips from happening. So that's how it should be with your existence. Like you're being born in a given century, if you like, that could prevent your being born in any later century. So the probability for each century should be going down, right? Or it could be zero at all times, right?
Okay.
But so like, okay, now imagine drawing a probability function that it's defined for all t going back to negative infinity to positive infinity, and it's constantly non-increasing over time. And it does not integrate to more than one. The total probability is not more than one. There is only one such function, right? It's that the probability is everywhere zero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so, but now that's all on the assumption that you could only live once, because if you could live more than once, then you could be born in any century, and that won't prevent, like if you'd been born 1,000,000 years ago, that wouldn't prevent your being here now, so it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. And forgive me, I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. And how does this mean that you can live more than once? Again, exactly.
I mean, we refuted the possibility that you can only live once.
Okay. Well, okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah. So so it's an assumption of the whole argument that the initial credence you give to reincarnation is non-zero.
Yeah.
So it's not an absurd theory. And also the probability of your being alive in the current century, given the truth of reincarnation, is non-zero.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. We don't have to know what it is as long as it's not zero.
Yeah. One thought I had, I mean, like, because I'm somewhat interested in like Christian apologetics and philosophy of religion, I suppose. I mean, there's a question of actual infinites, right? I mean, so you have you have an infinite path on this view. But also, like, I mean, if you take a four-dimensionalist view of time, you have an infinite future, an actual future, right? And so, like, perhaps some paradoxes could show that that's contradictory. I'm not entirely sure, but, like, you've obviously interacted with this. Like, what do you say to that kind of response?
Oh, yeah. So many Christians, I guess, William Lane Craig and his followers are against the infinite past. And then, like, there's this argument that you shouldn't posit an infinite past because you can't have an actual infinity. And okay, why can't you have an actual infinity? And then the most common thing they say is, well, there are these paradoxes of the infinite. And the best way of explaining what goes wrong in the paradoxes is that they posit actual infinities. Okay. And I have a different treatment of the paradoxes, which is that there can't be an infinite intensive magnitude. But there can be an infinite cardinality, and there can be an infinite extensive magnitude.
Okay.
Okay.
If you could spell that out for both me and John and the
Yeah.
audience, what is
Yeah.
that?
So cardinalities are counting numbers. So a cardinal number is an answer to a how many question, like one, two, three,
Mm,
and so on.
yeah.
And an extensive magnitude is a magnitude that is additive over the parts of a thing. So mass is normally thought of as extensive. So if you have a massive object, the mass of the left half plus the mass of the right half equals the mass of the whole.
Hmm.
Or length is a classic extensive magnitude. The length of the left half of your object plus the length of the right half equals the length of the whole.
Yeah.
But temperature would be an intensive magnitude. So the temperature of the left half of your coffee plus the temperature of the right half does not equal the temperature of the coffee.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, for sure.
Right,
Yeah.
so my claim is you can't have an infinite intensive magnitude, but you can have an infinite extensive magnitude.
Okay.
All right.
And this
That's
means that you can have the infinite past because duration is extensive.
Hmm.
But you can't have something like, infinite energy density.
Yeah.
My
Yeah. Yeah.
claim is that what goes wrong in the paradox is that something has to have an infinite intensive magnitude.
Mm. Yeah.
All right, so you get things like I know this is like a simple one. Like there's a lamp that gets switched on after half a minute, and then off after a quarter minute, and then back on after an eighth of a minute, and so on. So it gets switched infinitely many times in the course of 1 minute, and at the end of the minute, is it on or off?
Mm.
And then you find that puzzling. Okay, like oh, there's no answer to this question. It seems like there should be an answer to the question. Okay, and then right, and so like the simple response to this is, oh, well, you can't have an actual infinity, or you can't complete an infinite series, right? And I think that that is an incorrect resolution.
Mm.
Zeno's paradox involves an infinite series, but the correct resolution of that is that you can complete an infinite series.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Okay.
right,
Yeah.
it
For
looks like that is an actual infinity. So the thing about Thomson's lamp is, well, it requires infinite energy density to switch a lamp infinitely many times in the course of a minute. There would have to be a space-time region with an infinite amount of energy in it.
yeah.
Okay, and that's not the case with the Zeno series. An object is just moving from point A to point B normally does not require infinite energy density. So that is why one of them is possible and the other one is not.
Mm.
I guess my question about reincarnation isn't necessarily like paradoxes of infinity per se, which are very interesting. What's the story you tell for how a soul goes from just being a soul but to like have embodied life? Like what's the like do you have a story that you tell of like how like a soul goes from just being like, disembodied and immaterial into like
Mm.
a
Yeah,
state of embodied life?
yeah. No, nobody knows, right? There are psychophysical
Okay.
laws.
All right. I
There's some
figured that was gonna be the answer, but I just wanted to run it by you.
Yeah, there are some psychophysical laws that we haven't discovered yet because whatever this science is in its infancy. Um, it is a puzzle, actually. I mean, I think there's a puzzle about how the laws even could work because you have to explain why a particular body gets connected with a particular soul,
Yeah.
right? Given that these are like separate entities, and I'm not a property dealer, so I don't just think that there are mental properties of this physical object. I think there's a particular individual soul, right, or individual center of consciousness. And I don't know what the laws even could be about that. So in the physical world, particular physical objects get causally connected with other particular physical objects. But there is an answer to why the cause affected that particular physical object. Okay. So like, when I hit the table, okay, move my hand, and then something happens to this table, and it doesn't happen to your table. And there is a physics answer to why it happened to this table and not the other one,
Sure.
and it's spatiotemporal. It's because this table is the one that was in the right location in space, that was in the same location as my hand, and that doesn't work for the soul if the soul doesn't have a
Yeah.
spatial location. Right, so then it's not clear like what the story could be about what makes it
Yeah.
this particular soul. Um, maybe there's just some qualitative characteristics of a brain that are tied to a particular soul. So when a brain comes into existence that has the right qualitative characteristics, then it's you.
Mm. Yeah.
But I'm just making stuff up.
No. Are you sympathetic at all with like Thomas Nagel's like natural teleology? Like maybe there could be like a natural teleology story for how like a soul goes from like a disembodied state to embodied state? Like I know it's like speculation, but is
I guess I want to hear more about how this works.
I think Nagel talks about how like I don't know if he actually believes this, but I think it was in Mind and Cosmos where he talked about how there could just be kind of a natural teleology that's just inherent to the universe. Like there's a like some kind of ordering principle that directs things towards an end. Like he's not a theist, obviously, but like
Yeah.
that's just part of the fabric of the universe. And I'm wondering if that maybe that's there some way somehow, and somehow that natural teleology like directs the soul to certain bodies or something along those lines. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Right. So I think I think this is reminiscent of John Leslie's response to the fine tuning problem, right? Which is like Neoplatonism, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that
yeah,
yeah, like goodness has causal power, and
yeah.
sort of like it's the goodness of life that causes the universe to have these particular parameter values.
Sure.
Um, but then I'm thinking like that looks like an empirical hypothesis that should be testable, and I bet it's going to fail the test. So like here's a way. So it would seem like you can set up situations in which something can happen that will be bad or good, and then like you'll just notice that the good thing happens more often than would be expected from chance, right? Okay, so like here's a story. You set up, the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. So suppose that we set up a bunch of these boxes, and half of them have cats in them, and half of them don't, and there's just nothing in them. But then there's this radioactive atom that will decay, and then maybe it will decay more often in the empty boxes than in the boxes with cats. And like if goodness has any attractive force at all, it should be able to work in this case because according to quantum mechanics, it's completely random. So there's like nothing, there's nothing else to determine which way the atom should go. And so, okay, and I don't think this has been done, but you know what? I bet that the experiment will turn out that it doesn't matter if a cat is present or a human, and it doesn't matter if it's a really good human or a really bad human in the box.
Mm. Yeah, no,
Fair enough.
I had one question related to like the soul. Who are you? Who is Michael Huemer? Like, are you just a soul? Are you partially a soul? Yeah.
Yeah, so the soul, one of its functions is determining personal identity. So it's the non-physical entity that is the subject of mental states and properties, but also that determines the identity of persons, meaning where the soul goes is where you go. So if my soul goes into another body, then I am that other body.
Hmm.
Now, you might want to be asking like, well, what are the essential characteristics of a person?
Yeah.
And I don't really know, but I know a lot of things are not essential, right? So like your memories are not essential. You can lose all of your memories and continue to exist. Um, and like at least some of your personality traits are not. You know how we know this? Because your personality changes even just during your lifetime.
Hmm.
Any of the things that could have changed from childhood to adulthood are non-essential. And that means that in another lifetime you could be different in those respects.
Yeah.
Or things that could change if like you took drugs. Right? Just
Mm.
like that also changed your personality. And those things could change and they're not essential to you.
Yeah. So would you say that you continue to exist completely disembodied? Like that is completely you still?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not very interesting. It's not an
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah. Okay.
existence because
Yeah. Yeah.
when you don't
Yeah.
have a body, I take it that you have no experiences. Right? Which, by the
Yeah.
way, like in response to the physicalists, no, your body is essential. Like you can't go on having experiences without the body. So you'll just be a disembodied, experienceless soul. That's not absurd. It's not contradictory. Like there can be times when you're completely unconscious and experiencing nothing. So just
Yeah.
be cool. So if your brain gets damaged, then that will cause changes in your experiences. If it gets damaged in certain ways, like you'll lose um, mental capacities. You'll lose the capacities for having certain kinds of experiences. So like you could lose some emotions, or you could lose some of your memories, and these are all things that happen to people.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, John, do you have any concluding thoughts
Yeah,
or?
I don't know what makes me essentially me. So like so I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
like
don't.
I just have like I have intuitive reactions about some things that seems like it couldn't be me, but I
Yeah.
don't know
Mm,
that's right.
yeah. You know,
Well,
it's strange because like there's a sense in which like the self or the soul is you, but like if you're completely devoid of all your personality traits, you're kind of not you anymore. It's like there's kind of two dimensions of you, and it gets a little bit hairy.
I've
But
se- I've, I've seen enough sci-fi to say I don't know what I am essentially. You know, if I was in a parallel world or my soul was in a parallel world, I don't know how I would act. You know, so
yeah,
I would hope that there's some continuity, right? But you know,
Yeah.
I have.
You
yeah,
know, like by the way, like as this, if you think of this reincarnation theory as a scientific theory, right? Like scientists would be wondering things like, I wonder how many souls there are,
Yeah,
and what when a new baby is born, what exactly is the probability that it will be you?
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And um, I don't know. I take it that it must be at least a very large finite number. Possibly, it's possibly Aleph null. Um, and that could work out with the probabilities that is possible. But okay, the reason so it's got to be it's more than 8 billion. It's like probably much more because as far as I know, there's never been a time when two different bodies had the same soul.
Mm,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and and like just by chance that would happen sometimes unless there was a very large number of souls.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely very interesting. Well, I mean, I don't have any more questions or any more thoughts. Well, obviously, I always have questions and thoughts, but not for today. Do y'all have anything else to add, or
Did you
is that good?
convert to belief in libertarian free will at the end of all this? You
Not yet. You know,
you
I'm
asked
I see
you
the thing
asked you asked libertarian free will into your heart, and
is, no, not today. No, honestly, I think I need to like read more because like I was telling Dr. Huemer last time, I like listen a lot, but I don't have much time to sit down and read. It's like I really just need to read some more of this free will literature because I feel like I'm stuck in like I don't know like this weird like new atheist mindset where I'm just going to reject everything that's commonsensical to me or something. I don't really know, but it does still seem plausible to me. I actually did like a blog post on this because I was like laying in my views and I was like I feel insecure that I still believe these things even though but I do find them plausible and so like maybe I should still own them or something and but I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah. Anyway, Dr. Hummer, do you have any more thoughts or?
No, just like think more about free will. Read my papers if you haven't read them.
Yeah. We don't have to get into this right now, but I listened to a podcast you did with Miles. I forgot his last name. Y'all talked about this paper you did. It's an argument against determinism. And it's very interesting. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think I've given that argument multiple times. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, that could be another day. But anyway, it's very interesting. But anyway, well,
also
thank.
thank you for talking philosophy or religion earlier as well. That was
Yeah.
fun.
no, yeah, no. Thanks for having me, and
Yeah.
it's great talking to you guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, y'all have a wonderful day then.
You too.
All right.